Hi, this is Anne Marie Zanzal,
And this is Tonda McKay.
and we are going to talk about tonight. This is our weekly Wednesday night sessions. We have these every Wednesday at 6:30, and we talk about a variety of topics that are pertinent to our later in life community. And that crinkling you hear in the background is our puppy crinkling, eating something right now, and I don't want to go get him right now. So if you are watching this live, I invite you to go to StreamYard and so we're able to see your comments and see who is commenting. And also to Barb Rollinson, I hopefully will be on soon, and she can hand out, if you want any of the handouts we have for this event, please reach out to her. And if she's not available during this, please reach out to me afterwards. So what is courage? So if you look at the event, when I scheduled the event, the handout we did, there's Barb. The handout we did, it said finding your courage. And then when I was scheduling this event, I was like, it's not about finding your courage. It's our courage. It's about claiming it. Because what I realized that for our community, a lot of us are incredibly courageous all the time, and we have been for most of our lives. And so courage is having the mental or moral strength to venture perspectives and withstand danger and or difficulty. So one of the most popular posts in our group is the Fearless Friday post, because people like to see what other people do and how other people are courageous. So there are many different types of courage. So the first one, Tonda, is what?
Physical.
Yeah. So one of the ways to help us think about courage is, how have you showed up as physically courageous in your life? So Tonda and I were going through some things. And so how did you show up as physically courageous?
Well, I took karate for 13 years and went to tournaments, and so there's a huge difference and this was long before they wore face gear and stuff, when dinosaurs walked the world and stuff. And I would go to tournaments, and they would, when you're standing across from somebody who is a complete stranger to you, it takes some courage.
Yeah. And also, too, Tonda got her black belt, so she withstood that a bunch of times. For me, I was joking. It's having a baby after you've already had one. So going back for your second or third or fourth or fifth time, and I know some of you know what I'm talking about, that is courageous to have another child after feeling the pain. Somebody thought it was funny. Feeling the pain the first time around. There's social courage too. So it's exposing ourselves in social situations when we might feel vulnerable or embarrassment or ridicule. So isn't that really one of the biggest things about coming out later in life, is the social courage you have to show up and show? And what are some of those things?
To often be the only gay person. You're not the photographer, you're the gay photographer. You're not the mechanic, you're the gay mechanic. You're you're set apart, which is goes against our very instinct for survival.
What do you mean by that?
Well, our lizard brains, we are set up to be a community, to band together, because we can't survive on our own. And so just that's basically where shame comes from, is to help us not be so different on a very elemental level. We have the intellectual capacity to bypass that now, but that is, you're basically going against what people say you should be, and
Right. Right.
You know.
And I sort of was thinking about that this week, and especially around social, because what are some of the social things we face when we're coming out later in life? We often face, okay, being viewed as somebody who's gay or LGBTQ for the first time in our lives. Sometimes we're navigating divorce and considering divorce. And if we come from a place where heteronormative existence is held as the pinnacle, getting divorced can feel very scary and require courage. We get lot of pushback from family and friends. So the social courage that is required to come out later in life is actually quite great, but you all do it. And so we're trying to figure out how do we find this? How do we claim our courage? And what I want to do tonight is really remind people that you've already done this, that we've already claimed our courage in a lot of different ways. There's moral courage as well. I don't know if I can think of anything off the top of my head, but if you have ever gone out for a cause that you have, I've been to gun rallies. I mean, when I was in Sandy Hook. I was in the shooting at Sandy Hook, and I protested a lot of the gun stuff that right afterwards, because I had moral courage around that, because it was something I believed passionately about after seeing the devastation at Sandy Hook. There's also emotional courage. And if you guys have therapists or you've worked with coaches or something like that, emotional courage means you're okay feeling all the feelings that you're having. So I really think that one of the things that the greatest gifts about coming out later in life is that sometimes the grief, it can be so difficult that we can't push those feelings away anymore. We can't say that they don't exist. We can't push them down. And so we often end up feeling our feelings a lot for the first time in our life. So to actually courageously feel what we're feeling is actually pretty damn brave and badass as
Mm-hmm.
well. Intellectual courage, when you're willing to learn new things, or willing to learn that maybe how we had understanding around things could be wrong. I have done that a lot in my life, having intellectual courage about learning about new things. I think for a lot of the white folks in here, the Black Lives Matter movement has taught us a lot about a willingness to learn about racism and the things and how prevalent racism is in our society. So a lot of us have expanded our intellectual capability around that as well. And then for a lot of us, there's people that have to face spiritual courage. And what's that?
Um, well, it could be, you know, something like, for me, I always owned up to the fact that I was a Christian and I was gay, and I wasn't ashamed of either one of them after I you know, went through the messy middle and stuff that you talk about. And I had the intellectual courage to seek out answers to the questions that I had, instead of just saying, "Oh, I'm a bad person." And but I didn't feel that in my heart, and I don't feel that there's anything wrong with having your spirituality and being gay, no matter what everybody says,
Mm-hmm.
because um, remember when they use things like the Bible to say that slavery was okay. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everybody uses religion to try and get you to do what they want you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have spiritual courage to say, this is what I feel, this is what I know to be true for me, and I'm not gonna, back away from that.
Right. So what we have so one of the biggest learnings I had is that in this whole process is that I went back to school when I was 42 years old, and I got my master's degree then. And I guess I've always been a late bloomer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things I realized, that as long as I stayed within the parameters of what my family/society expected of me, I got pats on the backs. Hey, hey girl, you're doing a great job, kind of thing.
Mhm.
But as soon as I stepped out of the parameters of, excuse me, of what society expected of me, that's when all of a sudden we have to have courage. Because and I'm going to tell you, it didn't come easy for me. Because what I realized is that I always had done things that were deemed courageous, but they were always done within the box of society. So I did what I was expected to do. I was a good girl. I did what I was supposed to do. And so I was deemed courageous for going back to school and stuff like that. And it is, to some degree. But I didn't have to summon up my own courage until I really came out later in life. I did it when I was younger, and then I put it away for a while because I got a lot of pushback from the people I loved, and and but now, but then I, had to really start to dig into my own courage, and it wasn't easy. And so, for those of you who are in the beginning of this or in the beginning of the messy middle, um, a lot of times we feel really stymied. We feel like we're frozen in our places, but in actuality, a lot of the times we're not. So I call the 6 months between when I realized that I finally acknowledged the fact that I was gay and realized that I needed to do something about it. I needed to explore it. I needed to figure it out. Um, I call that 6 month period my fetal position phase because I almost felt like I had to summon my courage and summon my resources to be able to do this. But what I forgot is that during that time, and I think some of you guys have done this as well since you're in this group, I started to make slight little changes. So, for example, I joined the old Lily group. I joined that group, and all of a sudden, that tiny little step of finding community was one step forward in the journey. You know that Chinese proverb, the a journey of 1,000 steps begins with the first step. So it was that little step that that helped to propel me forward. We met online. And so meeting somebody and talking with someone and then eventually flirting with her, um, I was able to start to feel comfortable by courageously talking to somebody online. At first as a friend, but then as somebody who was a potential romantic interest, and stepping outside of my comfort zone to do that. How about
Well,
you?
I was just thinking that in the last 2 years, we've all had to summon a lot of courage up.
Right.
We've had a pandemic that at first you didn't know what was going on. You were afraid to go to the grocery store or to step out, and I was laughing because I was talking about physical courage. I had quintuple bypass. That was the most courageous thing I've actually ever done.
That's true.
Is having open heart surgery.
Well, she had no choice really, but it's like having a baby. So, another thing that I realized too is that someone said, I feel like it made me more spiritual here. And I often say that the coming out later in life coming out journey is often a spiritual awakening in a lot of ways. It makes us, what ends up happening is that the lens in which we look at the world shifts. So previously, because most of us have been in, heteronormative marriages and stuff like that, we have looked at life a particular way. But then as we go through this process of claiming our courage again and again and again, we end up having this incredible experience of really finding ourselves and listening to our voices and things like that.
Finding out who we are, our authentic selves, instead of what people have told us we are. And often because I don't know about for other people, but for me, you feel different when you've grown up and you maybe you didn't know it, but you're gay your whole life. So, it's like, why don't you want to wear dresses? Why don't you want to do this? Why don't you want to do that? And then when you find your people, you realize, oh, I'm not so different.
So, one of the things that we wanted to help people do is to really help them realize their courage. And so, Barb Rollinson created this amazing little handout, which this is there's two sides, and this is the second side. And what we're asking people to do is that a lot of times in our community, we do not recognize our own strengths. So, using the 6 types of courage that we mentioned, spiritual, intellectual, emotional, moral, social, and physical, um, that use those to think about how we have been courageous in our lives before, because what I have found is that a lot of times we don't give ourselves enough credit, and a lot of times we have been courageous before. And then another thing I think is really, really helpful to do, especially for those of you who are new or sort of in the messy middle and stuff like that, is to really sit down and write down everything you've done within like the since you started coming out. Like, what kind of changes have you made in your life? Who have you told? What have you done to make it to show up courageously time and time again? Um, it's so interesting. I love this, what Barb said. She didn't learn how to drive until she was 46 years old, but after she came out, um, she ended up learning to drive at 46. So courage begets courage, right? So I am curious too, if you'd like to say something like, after you came out, what things have you learned to do, and what have you like would never have done in your previous life, but now that you're in the process of you're either somewhere in this process, now you're showing courage and doing it again and again. um, I feel like coming out later in life has made me fearless, because like I've already done the hardest thing that I always was afraid of. And what ended up happening is that and like Barb says, courage begets courage. And so I'm not as afraid to do things anymore or to try new things. I remember thinking about, like, I used to take aerobics classes years ago. And some people might find this funny, but I always wanted to teach aerobics, and I was terrified to do that. I couldn't like get up in front of a group of people and do that. And now I do stuff like this all the time. And I just like, sometimes I'm like, where'd she go? Where is that girl that was so afraid to get up in front of a room to teach aerobics? I'm glad she's gone. She's still in here somewhere. But I found that, as I have embraced things that have frightened me, I have become less frightened.
Yes, I mean, not to, I mean, for me, uh, coming out, feeling I was gay at 18 was terrifying. Having sort of come out or being outed at 22 was absolutely terrifying. But living my life the way that I wanted to live my life, it just becomes normal.
Right. Right.
It's like this is kind of weird, but I used to be terrified about getting my period when I was a little girl, because everybody talks about how awful it is and how horrible, and it's this burden. And not that being gay is that, but I mean, you're like, it's just something, it is what it is, it's not, and graduating high school and going to college, it is
what it is.
And a lot of things that we're afraid of, my point being, a lot of things that we're afraid of where we are in our life, then we look back as we get older and we're just like, why was I afraid of that? And I think that's why much older people are so fearless. They just don't give a shit anymore. They're
Absolutely.
Like
And, somebody said, I've been courageous enough to cry every day. And that's pretty intensely, and to allow this time and accept it as okay. Um, for years, I was a mom. I fell into this life of being a mom, which is wonderful, but I lost me as an individual. Coming out is giving me the courage, not guilt, of being me. Good for you.
Yes.
Not just a mom and doing everything for the kids and feeling guilty for doing anything fun for me. Never cried so much in my life. Hey, I hear you. I was pretty much a mess for the first, couple of months, and I did do a lot of crying. But I also think too, for a lot of us, it's also the pent up grief of a lifetime sometimes. And so, as a grief counselor, one of the things I know is that when we keep adding grief to our grief glass gets full and overflows. And so, for those of us who have started down the straight path and we realize that we don't belong on it, we might actually belong on a different path. There is a lot of untangling, and there's regret, and sometimes there is, like, figuring out, like, letting go of the fear of what could come next. But it is I'm gonna say that for those of you who are new, um if you ask any of us, who have been doing this for a while, have been out, 3, 4, 5 years, who came out later in life, to it, almost everyone says they have no regrets about doing it, and that they're very, very glad that they made the choice to come out. So just remember to, when I was becoming a chaplain, my CP's clinical pastoral education supervisor, when I was doing my residency, said to me, and it was groundbreaking to me. She said to me, "A feeling is just a feeling." And so, although fear is a feeling too, they say that there's 5 feelings in this world: mad, bad, sad, glad, and afraid. It's just a feeling, and it will be pass. So if one of those things, as we become more aware of ourselves, is to be able to say, okay, I'm feeling afraid right now. It's okay. It will pass. I'll be able to move on. I'll be able to choose what I need to do next. But just remembering that all these very complicated feelings around this experience are all just temporary, and they often soon move into other things too, because
Mhm.
this experience honestly is holding grief, joy, and fear, and all of those all at once. And that can be really complicated to do.
Mhm.
So, a lot of pent up grief, and we understand that. So, if there's no questions or anything, I think I've said all I can say. So, if you have any questions, or if you want the handout from Barb, I really, really encourage you to do the PDF, because sometimes it really helps to have a visual reminder of what we have accomplished. And so, writing out your courage chronicles can be really, really wonderful, because you'll realize that you're a hell of a lot more courageous than you ever thought you were.
And just being a woman in society,
Yes, Tanda was saying
you
this
know,
before.
that just going to your car in a parking lot is
Mhm,
courageous,
mhm,
you know.
mhm, mhm,
And so you are courageous every day.
mhm, mhm. So maybe it's not so much about finding your courage; it's about claiming the courage that already exists within you. And I think I'm going to end tonight with saying that, I was a hospice chaplain for years. And so I worked with people at the end of their lives. And, people never had regret for the things they did, they had regret for the things they didn't do. So the thoughts they had, the leaving the marriages they weren't happy in, not that I worked with a lot of gay people that were coming out at death, but we have regret when we don't try something. And so, m- one of the one of the best things, if we think about coming out, like, if you say to yourself, when I'm at the end of this road, what will I look back on, and what will I be really glad I did, or wish I had done? So, um, having no regrets at the end of life, I think, is a great goal.
Mhm.
And so that's one of the things that I really think that's how one of the reasons why I came out after that is because of working with all those wonderful people that taught me so much about how to live.
Mhm.
So, all right, my friends, have a wonderful evening. Thanks, Barb Rollinson, for your great graphics and your help. And
Thanks to everyone who commented.
yeah, and thanks for everybody who commented and shared your story. And thank you for coming. We're so glad you're here. We will be doing another one every Wednesday night for the foreseeable future at 6:30 p.m. Central Time. And I think that's it.
Mhm.
All right, y'all, have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.